Hi Danish learner, welcome back to my channel Danish Matters. I'm Tina Baga, your Danish friend and tutor. Today is going to be a probably long video and I'm going to look a lot down because I have a lot of notes that I would like to refer to because this video is about Danish language history, and although the video might be long or going to be long, this is just a brief overview. Yeah, so I'm not going to go in depth with things. It's just to give you an idea of the Danish language over time. Before we get started, I would like to remind you that if you would like a Danish course with me, then write to tina@danishmatters.dk. So, Danish language history. People have been living in Denmark as far back as around 10,000 years ago. I know that compared to the continents of Africa and Asia, this is not old at all, but the lands of Denmark date back to the so-called prehistoric times still. That is when our Danish language history begins. So the Danish language is a Northern Germanic language. It belongs to the Eastern Nordic languages, together with the Swedish and some Eastern Norwegian dialects. If you're interested in seeing a language tree, there's several online. I'm not going to show any of them due to copyright issues, but look up online and find your language. And of course, Danish and Swedish and all of those, they're all part of the Indo-European languages, right? But in their Germanic and then Northern languages from that one. Indo-European languages is of course also English, yeah, together with German, yeah, they're just on the western and we are on the eastern side of this Germanic language branch within the Indo-European language branches, yeah, or tree, actually, language tree. Our Danish is a mix of languages because when I look up a word and I want to find its origin, I use the dictionary ordnet.dk, so ordnet.dk. And oftentimes what I learn is that a lot of the words in Danish, they originate from Low German languages, which we in Danish call Platttysk. I think they call it Plattdeutsch in German. And other words derive from Latin languages, often French in modern times, English, it's sort of from that as well. And English is influencing our language a lot today, but we have a lot of French words, a lot of German words within our language. So of course the French ones, they come from Latin languages, yeah, but today we think of them as more or less as French. So Danish has evolved during our periods of war as well as trade and general travel and adapting words into our language from, well, especially French and German and English, but who knows if one day the influence is going to be from Chinese or Russian, who knows? That is a question that we can put out. So the Danish language back in time, little story here. Once I had a student who was reading aloud a text to me, and he came across the word café, meaning a cafe in Danish, and he pronounced it like kaffe, coffee. And so I corrected him, and he got a little bit upset and a little bit angry, and he said, well, café is French. It's a French word. Can't we just take all French words out of the Danish language? And I said, like, you know, with a sort of glint in my eye, sure, together with German and English, and we'll be left with the old Western Nordic language, which nobody understands. Yeah, so speaking a modern day Danish is really speaking a Danish with lots of influence from other languages. That is just what the Danish language consists of, yeah. So what is the Danish language really? So in order to estimate the best way, we need to talk about history first, yeah? So when Danes talk about historical periods of time in Denmark or like related to Denmark, we do not always talk about the same periods, that is, with the same names or translated names, nor the same year or times as other European countries or other Europeans. We talk about the Iron Age, for example, and then we refer to the late antiquity or early Middle Ages. And when we say the Viking Age, we really mean early Middle Ages in the rest of Europe. So in other words, historical periods of time are often named differently in Danish than in most of Europe. So be aware of that if you or when you speak with Danes about history. Yeah, might not be the same periods that you're talking about. Yeah, and sort of in general, you can assume that Denmark was behind. That's the rule of thumb, because we were until later on in history. Yeah. So during what we call the Stone Age, which is really several historical ages or periods of time, the items or their materials that people made things from really were from stone, but they were also made of bone or horn, other things as well. Yeah, just not any metal. During the Bronze Age, which to us would be the 1800s to 500, yeah, only some material were actually made of bronze because it takes copper and tin was actually pretty difficult to get a hold of. So it wasn't all that many things that were actually made of bronze, but we call it the Bronze Age. And from the Bronze Age in Denmark, we have a unique artifact, which is called Solvognen. And that is their sun chariot, or the sun cart, maybe some might call it. And I can try and show you a picture in just a minute, but it's a cart, it's a carriage in a way, with a horse that is sort of dragging it. And then there is this circle on it it was made of bronze, but there is some golden spots on it still, and it was made fully of gold back in time. And it was representing the beliefs of the people that they thought that the sun was dragged or driven from a horse-driven cart. So from one side of the sky to the other side of the sky, they thought that the sun could move only that way. That was their belief, yeah, because that's what they saw in their daily lives. They saw carts with horses, so they thought that the sun was also sort of dragged or driven by a horse across the sky. So yeah, that's what people believed back in time. And this sun chariot or cart was found, it dates back to 1350 BC, so before Christ, and it was found in 1902 in the northwestern part of Zealand. So today there is a copy displayed at Nationalmuseet, so our Danish National Museum, and if you wish, you can actually buy your own mini copy of it in their shop. My aunt has done so. It looks so pretty in her home. I am just gonna find a photo to show you. It is taken from Wikipedia, yeah, so that it's not going against any copyright issues here, any copyrights. So it looks, I don't know if you can see it well enough due to reflexes, but this is what it looks like. Yeah. So in Danish, Solvognen, yeah. I'm just gonna find my notes here again. Yeah. So it's interesting, or as interesting as the Bronze Age might be, it wasn't until the Iron Age, as we call it, that is 500 BC to 700 AD, the last of the prehistoric periods, that we have anything written. And that is essentially why we call it prehistoric times, right? Before history began. Well, history was there, we just don't know that much about it because we don't have any written sources. So before we noted anything that we can actually see today and interpret today, before that, it was the prehistoric times. Yeah, so it wasn't until the Iron Age that we began to have things that we could actually look at and try and interpret from the people who lived in those times or during those times. Yeah. In Denmark, there was this written or writing system, and it wasn't not just in Denmark. It was in the Nordic region and in the Germanic region of the world, which was called runes, runer in Danish. And it was a writing system developed on the basis of alphabets around the Mediterranean in the centuries after the birth of Christ. Yeah, so they were used for more than 1,200 years, and that was during the Iron Age, the Viking Age, as we call it. I know it sounds funny, but that's what we call it. Vikingetiden in Danish. And way into the Middle Ages, actually. Although they did change along the way, it was still sort of that rune system. And it was called Futhak, or the Futhakin system. And that was because of the 6 first signs within it. And the third of those signs, it looks a little bit like a bee, that continues with its line down, and that's the th sound, just like in English, right? The throw or thing kind of sound, the th. I think it might still exist today in the Icelandic alphabet, I think, but I'm not sure. So this kind of system was used, and it was used also to write on what we call Jellingsten. And those are stones placed in a town in Jutland called Jelling. Yeah, they are 2 stones, a big one and a small one. And the small one is possibly from around 950 AD, and the stones are together with Jelling Kirke, that is Jelling Church, and 2 major mounds, Jellinge Monumenterne, on UNESCO's World Heritage list. Yeah, so they're pretty unique. The smallest one was a gift from King Gorm, the old or the elder, Gorm den Gamle in Danish, in memory of his wife, Tyra Danebod. And the stones are said to mark the passage from the Viking Age into the Christian times. They are the first written account of Denmark, and for that reason they are also referred to as the Danish birth certificate, or Denmark's birth certificate, dåbsattest. However, Denmark also has artifacts with runic letters from before Jellingsten, only not really referencing Denmark as a country. In Møltun, that is a city in Jutland, that is the big island, or actually the peninsula bordering to Germany today, which is called Jylland in Danish. 2 golden horns were found, one long one in 1639 and a shorter one in 1734. And the short one, on that one, there is an inscription with runic letters from around 450 AD. In Latin letters, the inscription reads something like, and let's see if I can say it to you. I mean, sort of like I and then a name in 2 words, at least when we read it in Latin letters. I, blah, blah, name, made the horn. In Danish, it's different. It's jeg skovboeren, or actually jeg lægest skovboeren fremstillede dette horn. So as you can hear, the translations aren't like one to one. They're not the same, and there are many translations. So these are just two. Yeah, many possible translations exist. These horns, they were stolen actually in 1802 and melted down. I can't bear to say it. It's really hard saying that, sorry. So sad. But yeah, they were. But drawings dating back to 1734 had been made, and so they were displayed. Copies were made from the drawing from 1734, and they were displayed then at the National Museum. However, at an exhibition where their copies of the horns were displayed in Jelling in 2007, they were stolen again, but they were also found again. Today, you can see them in the National Museum. One of Denmark's most famous poets, Adam Oehlenschläger, and I know that his last name is definitely not how I pronounce it. I mean, I don't pronounce it right, but we say it like that. Look him up. He's from 1779. He lived until 1850. We call him Adam Oehlenschläger. He wrote a poem titled Guldhornene, so the golden horns, right after they had been stolen the first time. Most Danes will know the first line, which goes, De higer og søger I gamle bøger. Sort of, they look and search in old books. Yeah, so they were trying to find the golden horns back in those times. It's interesting to know, and I think some have speculated about, the fact that this poet lived only a few houses from the place where the thief, which they did find, Niels Heidenreich, melted the horns. Yeah. Guldhornene, the golden horns, themselves are considered a national symbol of Denmark's glorious past. Yeah. So today there is actually a memorial plaque mounted in Vestergade by Politikens Hus in Copenhagen. It was placed there in 1935, their 85th year of Adam Oehlenschläger's death. So yeah, to commemorate this great poet. So, going on with our language itself, later on came Latin. So after the runes came Latin, and that would be the language of the educated and the language of our faith, our administration, our laws. Yeah, a very important language for a long time. So priests, doctors, lawyers, they would use the Latin language, as well as many people around Europe. Yeah. Subsequently, Danish, was used more and more, thus proper Latin was known by fewer, and one can imagine the shift from Latin to Danish didn't really happen without difficulty. Court reports, although knowing some Latin, knew more, court reporters, although knowing some Latin, knew more Danish than Latin later on, and this resulted in some Danish words here and there, but with sort of Latin conjugations in the text that they were recording. That has been pretty funny to later linguistic people looking at those scriptures. Yeah. So in the 1400s, some parts of the Bible was translated into Danish, and it was then more common that preachings and hymns were in Danish, although there were and still are words from both Latin and Greek actually in the Danish language. So words like kirke, church, and salme, hymn, kors, cross, præst, priest, nonne, a nun, kloster, convent, or abbey, and the word skrive, so the verb skrive, to write, yeah, they all came from those languages. One old one that we actually have still kept from before those languages entered our country or our language is the word for God, Gud, G-U-D, still today spelled with a capital G, yeah, Gud. So faith, that is Christianity, had a major impact on the Old Nordic and Germanic court proceedings. The rules of the law were first upheld orally, and the words were Old Norwegian, Icelandic, kind of, and there was also some kind of Swedish fornsvensk, which meant like it was called lagsaka, which meant sort of area for which the said law applies, something like that. It's a little bit difficult to translate, but yeah. So the Christian faith, the Christian religion really had a lot of influence on a lot of scriptures and a lot of upholding of our laws and administration in Denmark. On the facade of the Københavns Byret, Copenhagen municipality court or district court or lower court, depending on what you want to call it, former Copenhagen City Hall. Above the entrance, so above the pillars that are on that building, it says, "Med lov skal land bygges." And this line is from Jyske Lov, so Atlantic law from 1241. And the first lines from it reads, "Med lov skal land bygges, men ville enhver nøjes med sit eget og lade andre nyde samme ret, der behøvede man ikke nogen lov." This is the modern translation, yeah? So this modern translation means sort of, with the law shall land be built, but if everyone would mind their own business and let others enjoy the same right, then no law would be needed. And this is my translation, yeah? And just a little side note, yeah, also to just have a little fun with this video, it actually reminds me of the children's book called Folk og Røvere i Kardemommeby. It's about some robbers in a town called Kardemomme. And it's from 1955 by a Norwegian author called Torbjørn Egner. And the title means People and Thieves in the Town of Kardemomme. And that one has been translated into Danish, and which is it's widely known in Denmark. And the book portrays a small town, Kardemomme, and its citizens, especially 3 thieves or robbers, Kasper, Jesper, or Jonathan, at least in Danish, who have a pet lion. And a few of the townspeople, among them, there is politimester, so their chief or head of police, Mr. Bastian, so Herr Bastian in Danish. And this policeman, he's in conflict averse and he's a conflict averse and he doesn't do much, least of all arrest anyone, unless he really has to. And he sometimes has to when it comes to the 3 otherwise very nice thieves. Bastian has written a very simple law, which he keeps in his pocketbook and which he also sings, and it goes, the words go something like this. Jeg har lavet en kardemommelov, som gælder, hvor man står. Og i kardemomme-lommeloven, I'm just trying to do this again. Jeg har lavet en kardemommelov, som gælder, hvor man går. Og i kardemomme-lommeloven står, man skal ikke plage andre eller sætte livet til, og for øvrigt kan man gøre, hvad man vil. And this roughly translates into, I have made a cardamom law, or the law from the Kardemomme city or town, which applies wherever you go. And in the Kardemomme law, it says, you shouldn't torment others or take your life. And other than that, you can do as you please. So I don't know if you could sort of hear like the sound of that old law that you can do what you sort of don't do something bad, and if everyone would just mind their own business, then you really wouldn't need any law. I mean, it just reminds me of this children's story. I don't know if it's a little far out, but that's what it reminds me of. And I wonder if Norway's and Denmark's common history was influenced in this funny and familiar children's story. One could think so, as Norway was part of the Danish kingdom from 1536 to 1814, and as the law Norske Lov from 1687 was partly created from a new Danish law titled Danske Lov from 1683, and although the phrase med lov skal land bygges and so on stems from Jyske Lov, Danske Lov probably also applied to Norway, as Danske Lov was created from Jyske Lov, which, as we just saw, was from 1241. So, don't know, just wondering, just to have a little fun, yeah? So, from that law, Danske Lov, I'm just gonna look in my notes here, we continued with the laws that we have today. We have Grundloven, our constitution from 1849, which just celebrated its 175th anniversary. Yeah, this year in 2024. But going a little back to our language here, I just want to quickly go back to the ruins and then back to Latin language again. So the ruins were used for more than 1200 years, yeah, from around the 2nd century. And we found these golden horns with a little scripture in the runic language on one of the horns. Yeah, I read to you what their scripture said. Yeah, maybe that's just enough for that. Yeah, so now we had more and more Danish going into our language. And something stayed in Latin for a long time, way into the 1300s, for example, testaments and about real estate and so on. But part of law was now in Danish, and you can see that people have been struggling a little bit, as I said, with the Latin and the Danish sort of mixture. Yeah. I hope that this gave you sort of an idea of our language from prehistoric times until now. We can talk about the Danish language today, because the Danish language is, of course, still evolving. It's still developing. Today it's influenced by, well, other languages still, of course. English has a huge influence on the Danish language. Lots of youngsters, they say a lot of English words instead of Danish words, and there are a lot of English words that we just use because we don't have any Danish words for them. For example, computer. Yeah, we do say computer in Danish. We don't have another word for that. As they do, for example, in Swedish, datamat. I don't know if they have really gone into saying computer just yet, but they used to have a word of their own, yeah? Same thing in French, they would have ordinateur. I don't know if they still say that. I should know, I'm educated in French. I haven't used it for a long time. I'm not really up to date with the French language. I don't know if they say that today, but they have had their own, whereas we haven't. So we often get words from other languages and we use those. Sometimes we spell them a little bit differently. Nowadays, not so much. We sort of take the word and we use it the way it's spelled in the original, normally English language. Yeah. So the Danish language is influenced by languages, but also from lots of media, yeah? Social media, TV, radio, all sorts of, yeah, movies and series and, yeah, TV in general. All sorts of events around the world, debates that we've had. We had, for example, some years ago, a masking ban in Denmark, but among the population, it was sort of more put as the burqa ban, burqa-forbud. Yeah, so that's a word now that we actually say. It's a word within our language. Urbanization, that a lot of people move into the city, although they have actually tried to move some companies out of the city to make people stay in the outskirts. With more or less success, but that also changes how we use our language. And for example, inventions, and one I can just mention is, for example, Skype, which is actually an abbreviation. And there was a Dane inventing that. And Skype is actually Sky Peer-to-Peer. So when it becomes popular enough, you can abbreviate it and it became Skype. I know that Skype is old today. You have other platforms and so on, right? But that's just an example. Of course, we have slang, and slang among young people and slang about people my age is different, just as it was between my generation and my parents' generation. I mean, that's normal. I just want to mention one, and that is sort of a swear word, or it used to be, because that's the word of sku, S-G-U. It actually is an abbreviation and meant så Gud, S-A with a circle above is O, and then new word, the word for God, Gud, G-U-D, så Gud, so actually so God. That was in some periods of time perceived as a swear word. You were not allowed to say that, probably because for a long time saying anything with God was not, it was frowned upon. So you didn't do that, yeah? But then it was a swear word for a long time, and then now it's actually, well, now, some years, it has been in the dictionary as not a swear word. I do think, though, that among the Danish population, we still consider it a swear word. I still find it a swear word when I hear it and when I say it. So, and the way we use it is actually this way. Now I'm teaching you to not swear. For example, jeg gider sgu ikke lave mit hjemmearbejde. Sort of like, I don't really feel like doing my homework. Ja, jeg gider sgu ikke. Ik is ikke, ja, jeg gider sgu ikke lave mit hjemmearbejde, meaning that the sentence structure is actually that this sku word is placed right before the central adverb, in this case, ikke. Ja, jeg gider sgu ikke, that's the central adverb, lave mit hjemmearbejde. Jeg gider sgu ikke lave mit hjemmearbejde. Yeah. So now I have taught you not to swear. So this was a little bit about the Danish language today, and back in time it was a little bit frowned upon when people were speaking sort of a dialect of the Danish language from Jutland, from Finland. I mean, not sort of like the standardized Danish. Today it's more accepted even on TV. Back in time, journalists and reporters, they had to learn standardized Danish in order to have a job within the media. Today, you can actually keep your Jutlandic accent or dialect. I do think, though, that they have to change it a little bit if they want people to understand, because not all people understand all kinds of, for example, Jutlandic dialects, but there is still a better acceptance of dialects. But of course, we joke among each other, just like you do in your country. We make fun of people living in the countryside, and they make fun of people like townspeople or Copenhageners. I mean, yeah, that's just humor within a country, right? But Danish has sort of been replaced a little bit by English in some fields, and that is the academic field. So academic Danish has sort of been replaced by academic English. So Danish has changed a little bit into more the daily language among people in general. And some people actually fear that Danish is going to be a sort of lower language and English is going to be sort of the language among the well-educated people. So there's going to be this discrepancy or this huge gap between people due to the language. Don't know if that's ever going to happen, but that's the fear of some people, or even that Danish is going to disappear as a whole. We never know either, as I said in the beginning, if Danish is going to be influenced by Chinese or Russian or any other languages, yeah? And their cultures, of course, because language and culture, they're intertwined, yeah? If you would like to look up words in Danish, go to ordnet.dk, yeah? Or you can also use ordbogen, ordbogen.com. That is an English-Danish-Danish-English dictionary, and it's actually also for other languages. I have talked to native English speakers, and they say that it's a really good one, yeah? It is pay after 4, and I show three fingers, 4 words a day. So you can look up 4 words a day, otherwise it's pay, yeah? If you're interested in knowing about 139 Danish/Nordic words in the English language today, yes, because the Nordic languages have actually influenced the English language as well, you can go down in their comment section and you'll find in the comments or where I write about this video, you can find the link for that. And there's also a video, a link to where you can see that hygge has become an official English word in 2017, just for the fun of it, yeah? But Danish has actually influenced English. Words like mor, far were actually in Danish, older Danish, moder, fader. Can you hear the very close similarities to mother, father, yeah? And words like hus, yeah? Or drink, yeah? Words like that, they actually come from the northern languages and they have been adopted into the English language. Yeah. So I hope you got something out of this video about Danish language history. I would just like to point out that what I have been talking about today mostly comes from a source from a Danish author called Bent Jørgensen and his book Dansk Sproghistorie from the publishing house Det Danske Sprog- og Litteraturselskab, and it was published in 2014. Yeah. So thank you so much for watching. This was a very long video. Sorry about my mix-up a little bit in the middle sort of this video. A little bit difficult to refer to all my notes. I hope you got something out of it anyway. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel grow. And hit the notification button if you want more videos from Danish Matters. And remember that if you would like a Danish course with me, then write to danishmatters.dk. And note that the Danish language history is what is the foundation of this whole Danish language from this old territory that we today call Denmark. Yeah. And I just got left to say, happy Danish learning.